simple concept for stress reduction that is overlooked by so many of us, but I really think it's important. We're going to talk about being exactly okay with right where you are and your circumstances, and the process of becoming who you are and becoming aware of who that is. And so I'm Dr. Natalie Gonzalez. I practice integrative and functional medicine. I'm a retired surgeon who went back to study for integrative medicine, which means the idea of using the best of alternative and conventional means to optimize your health. And I studied functional medicine, which means that I'm going to be looking for the root or underlying causes of the things that disrupt our health. So this morning, a very simple concept for stress reduction, and that has to do with being okay with exactly who you are right now, because you are doing the best with what you have to work with all of the things that have made you who you are to this point in your life, and all of the things that you're working with in your day-to-day existence that make it more challenging for you, or maybe some days less challenging. And just this idea of becoming the best of who you can be, and not really comparing yourself to someone else. This is a really hard concept for all of us. And we can go back and say, oh, I should have done something a different way, or I should have been doing this a certain way all along. And that's not necessarily the case. You are always working at the level of what you are capable of doing at any point in time. And I think it's good to remember that. And over the weekend, I got away from my 11 o'clock live sessions. I decided to just take time away from a project that I was really focused on. I happen to be somebody who can focus on things, a big project, to the exclusion of everything. And that might sound good, but in some ways it's not so good for the people around you and the other things that need to be carried on during that intense focus. And so I decided to pull myself away from a major project that I was focusing on and focus on my husband a little bit over the weekend. And we took time away and went to an area of Montana where there is no cell service. There are no cell towers in that area. And believe it or not, there's still places like that even in the United States. And we were in one of them for several days, and I couldn't film anything during that time, so I didn't. And I just focused on where we were, and it was a super moon during that time period. We had clear skies and beautiful skies for stargazing and for the moon. And it was very silent. We were on the Missouri River, on the banks of the Missouri River, and I was able to hear the fish coming up the shoreline and feeding on the shoreline, the paddlefish, which I've never really known anything about until this weekend. And to hear them coming up along the river edge and feeding along the edge, it was an amazing night, and next to a campfire, and we really enjoyed the time there. And we were out there for the fall. We were on the wildlife refuge, so we were viewing the elk in their breeding season, and it was fascinating to observe that from a distance, and really cool nights for sleeping, and wonderful several days with my husband. So that's where I was, rather than here filming my 11 o'clock sessions. And I will get better at these. I will also, obviously I'm going to need to pick certain days of the week that I'll be doing them regularly. I'm still gonna, until I get to that point where I'm really good at it, I'm still gonna try the 11 a.m. sessions each day until I master some of the parts of it that I'm not doing well at, and that I haven't mastered, I should say. And just be able to accept where I am in this process. So this is a really interesting concept for us as individuals who are trying to optimize our health with food, with exercise, with sleep, with stress reduction. This is a very, very essential part of the process, is being okay with where you are in this process, because we don't start out doing it perfectly. It takes years. It took me 2 years to cut back on foods that contained flour and sugar and all the things I didn't want in there. And that was, just bread. It took me 2 years to cut back on bread to the point where I actually don't eat anything less than whole wheat bread usually. But I did splurge this past weekend, and I had some sourdough bread in a restaurant, and I don't know if it was worth it. I don't know. I'm giving myself that grace, and just know that it's not something I'm going to be doing all the time. I ate in a number of restaurants through that time period, and I really was able to find things in restaurants that were very healthy for me. And even the waiting staff, the waitress and the cook staff were surprised. And these different restaurants, I found that they could be creative in what they offered for my salad. So I said to them, I want a salad with greens, with no croutons, no cheese, no bacon bits, no dressing. And they said, well, what are we going to put on that salad? And I said, well, we can start with tomatoes, which they had. And they were cooking fried cucumbers and fried pickles and fried mushrooms and onion rings. And I said, well, can you give me some onions, mushrooms, and cucumbers? And they said, sure. And they gave me those. They gave me olives. They found cranberries. And I said, I don't want, if they had beans, which they didn't in these cases, they didn't have beans, corn, peas, but those are options in restaurants. And I said, do you have mustard? Because mustard contains mustard seed, which is cruciferous vegetable. It contains turmeric, which is an anti-inflammatory spice, especially when you combine it with pepper. And mustard is delicious on salads. It has that tangy taste, has a little bit of spiciness to it with the turmeric and the mustard. And then you add the pepper to it, which helps you absorb it. These were delicious salads, and each restaurant that I went to, they offered something a little different than the last. For example, the olives, I wouldn't have ever thought to ask for olives, but they thought, wow, she said vegetables, let's try olives. And I thought it was fascinating when I said, I want vegetables on my salad, and they said, because they said, what are you going to have besides lettuce? And then they would find those things in the kitchen and put them on the salad. So it was very fascinating to do it that way. I might have, if I was really going to splurge, I might have had, I was going to say, sweet potato. So they had sweet potato fries, but I really wasn't going for the extra oils, so I didn't do that. I might have been able to ask them to bake a sweet potato if they had fresh sweet potato. So that would have been a really good one. Or you could have baked potato. just ask them for a baked potato with your salad. So leave the skins on and then add it to your salad. That's another really good option. So very fun to travel around the state, not worry about whether I could stick to my usual things or not, and just relax and be okay with where I am in this process and who I am becoming. So I'm Dr. Natalie Gonzalez. If any of this has been helpful to you, make sure that you share it with a family or friend that it might help. And if you're not sure who to share it with, then ask YouTube to share it. Just like it, and they'll find somebody else like you to share it with. Subscribe if you haven't. Take care and have a wonderful, wonderful day. And we'll see you back here in one of our next videos. Thanks.